telling me no, but my body's telling me yes.
Yo, what's up everyone? Word is Robert finally stepped out those gates, and the streets didn't waste a single second pulling up on him. The man barely had a chance to breathe some fresh air before things got loud. Real loud.
People have no idea that there's two different men. That there's the person, Robert, there's the persona, R. Kelly.
Strap in, because what actually went down the moment those jail doors swung open played out like a scene from a movie. Between the cigar lounges, the failed appeals, and the heat of solitary confinement, February 25, 2019, was the day Robert Kelly turned a standard Monday into a total spectacle. After spending about 4 days in Cook County Jail on state sexual abuse charges involving 4 victims, 3 of whom were minors, a woman from the Chicago suburbs stepped up and posted his $100,000 bond. Around 5:25 p.m. those gates finally opened, and for the moment, he was a free man. But what he did next is exactly why this story still lives on the internet today. He rolled out in a black van, and just 30 minutes later, that van pulled up at the iconic rock and roll McDonald's in Chicago's River North neighborhood. Out of all the places a free man could go, he decided to stop for some chicken nuggets and Big Macs. He was out there signing autographs, shaking hands, and posing for selfies with fans like he was at a scheduled meet and greet. One fan even shouted, "I love you," while he just smiled and waved back. But the McDonald's stop was just the warm-up. From those golden arches, his crew headed over to Big's mansion, an upscale cigar lounge in the high-end Gold Coast area. He spent hours inside kicking back with cigars, while his entire life was essentially catching fire outside those doors. That whole sequence, from jail to fast food to a cigar lounge in a single evening, became the defining image of his brief taste of freedom. The cigar sightings didn't stop there, though. Months later on Easter Sunday, April 21, 2019, TMZ caught him posted up outside his Trump Tower condo in Chicago. He was standing next to a Rolls-Royce puffing on a massive cigar like the lead in a mob movie, smoking it down to the stub while talking on his phone. The headlines all pointed out how unbothered he seemed. Even with child support drama and federal investigations closing in, he was out there looking like he was on a permanent vacation. It was right around this time that he sat down with Gayle King for that infamous CBS interview, and when she asked which allegations were bothering him the most, he completely went off the rails.
What are the lies that you're hearing that disturb you most?
Oh my God, all of them. That little girl's trapped in the basement.
That entire sit-down was peak Robert energy. He was in full denial, hands waving everywhere, getting visibly heated over being portrayed as a monster.
They were describing Lucifer. I'm not Lucifer. I'm a man. I make mistakes.
Real talk, the contrast between him breaking down on national television and then casually grabbing a Big Mac is exactly why these clips never die. Looking back years later, those images of carefree autographs, massive cigars, and the Rolls-Royce clash heavily with the reality of him sitting in federal prison with a 2045 release date. That irony is a goldmine for memes and commentary across TikTok, Instagram, X, and Facebook. The misinformation crowd leans into it too. Old footage constantly gets reposted with captions claiming he's been released, escaped, or pardoned. In fact, PolitiFact had to step in during 2024 to confirm he was still behind bars, pointing out that the 2019 bail footage was being recycled with misleading headlines. Some manipulated versions even add fake subtitles or AI-generated prison songs to push the narrative even further. The Trump Tower cigar clip in particular stays in the meme rotation alongside other big cigar videos. As recently as April 2026, Chatter on X still references it whenever someone is seen smoking a fat one. The McDonald's footage takes on an even darker irony, especially since allegations in the surviving R. Kelly documentary mentioned him approaching teenage girls at McDonald's locations in the past. When reports circulated in early 2026 confirming his projected release date as December 21, 2045, social media went into a frenzy. TikToks and Instagram Reels started resurfacing those 2019 cigar lounge clips with captions like, "This was the last time he was free." Some posts even pushed false early release claims that fact-checkers had to shut down immediately. Now, let's look at the legal battle. Robert's team has been swinging at every possible angle to try and break this case open. His attorneys, including names like Jennifer Bongine and Beau Brindley, have run the entire playbook. However, the 2021 New York conviction for racketeering and sex trafficking landed him a 30-year sentence that has proven incredibly difficult to challenge. Following the 2022 conviction in Chicago, an additional 20 years were tacked on for the production of child pornography, with 1 year of that sentence set to run consecutively. When you do the math, it brings the effective total to roughly 31 years. This puts his projected release date at December 21, 2045. By which time he'll be nearly 79 years old. His legal team took the appeals as far as they could go. On February 12, 2025, The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously upheld the New York convictions and the 30-year sentence. The court dismissed his arguments as meritless, concluding that he had exploited his celebrity status for over a quarter of a century. The Seventh Circuit handled the Chicago appeal and reached the same conclusion, upholding that conviction as well. The defense eventually moved toward the Supreme Court, but found no luck there either. After a denial in October 2024 and another petition in May 2025, the Supreme Court officially declined to hear the appeal for a second time on June 23, 25. That decision effectively shut the door on any direct appeals. Throughout all of this, his stance remained the same as in his earlier interviews, portraying himself as the victim in the situation.
I have been assassinated. I have been buried alive. But I'm alive.
Even with the odds stacked against them, the legal team didn't back down. In August 2025, they filed a motion to disqualify the entire U.S. Attorney's office from the case. However, Judge Martha Picold rejected the request, labeling it extreme and noting that it completely failed to meet the high legal standards required for such a move. Perhaps the most shocking development occurred in June 2025. The defense filed an emergency motion alleging that 3 Bureau of Prisons officials were involved in a murder-for-hire plot, supposedly trying to recruit an Aryan Brotherhood inmate to take Robert out. They also claimed his mail was being tampered with, and that attorney-client privilege had been violated. During a press conference, attorney Beau Brindley framed Robert as a whistleblower exposing systemic corruption, even drawing parallels to issues mentioned by President Trump. Taking it a step further, the team bypassed standard legal channels to publicly appeal to Trump for clemency. Judge Picold ultimately denied the motion, citing a lack of jurisdiction since Robert is being held in North Carolina rather than Chicago. Prosecutors were quick to fire back, describing the allegations as fanciful and completely unserious. Looking back at his infamous interview with Gayle King, it's clear Robert had been rehearsing this same victim energy for a long time.
30 years!
Robert.
30 years of my career! Y'all trying to kill me!
The length of the sentence remains a major point of contention. On one hand, victim advocates argue that 30 years is actually quite lenient, considering the decades of alleged abuse involving dozens of victims, many of whom were minors. Conversely, some commentators view 30 years as overly harsh for non-homicide crimes, questioning the use of RICO charges against an individual artist rather than a traditional criminal organization. During sentencing, the judges pointed to a calculated 25-year pattern of behavior that showed a complete indifference to human suffering. Fast forward to mid-February 2026, and Robert is back in trouble. He was placed in solitary confinement, the Special Housing Unit or SHU, at FCI Butner Medium 1. The situation started during a cell search after his cellmate was caught with a contraband phone. During the sweep, officials found Robert's notebook, which contained the personal cell phone number of a retired prison warden. To be fair, there was an explanation. Robert had been part of a prison mentoring program overseen by this official, who reportedly gave Robert his number for advice on the program before retiring. While his attorney, Beau Brindley, maintains the contact was legitimate, prison officials saw it differently. Having the personal contact info of a former official is a major security red flag, especially when found near a contraband phone. As a result, they opened an internal investigation and moved Robert to the SHU as a precaution. Brindley described the conditions there as devastating. Inmates in the SHU are locked down for roughly 23 hours a day with almost no access to the commissary, phone calls, visitors, or recreational programs. Robert lost all these privileges during his 2-week isolation. It brings to mind that famous Gayle King interview where Robert broke down desperately pleading for support.
I need somebody to help me not have a big heart.
By mid-March 2026, the internal review was finally completed, and with no evidence of wrongdoing found, Robert was moved back into the general population. His attorney Beau Brindley criticized the situation unjustified and unfair. The resolution of the incident was covered by Black Enterprise, though the Bureau of Prisons maintained its standard policy of declining to comment on internal security matters. Naturally, the fan reaction was a complete circus. The Free R. Kelly camp went into overdrive, flooding social media with outrage and conspiracy theories about targeted harassment. Their main argument was that the system is constantly looking for reasons to mess with him, claiming this was all a move to derail his ongoing appeals. On the other side, critics and victim advocates had a very different perspective. Their reactions ranged from complete indifference, with many saying he deserves even worse, to sharp sarcasm and reminders of the crimes that put him there in the first place. Looking back at his past interviews, Robert had even hinted that he needed more than just a legal team to get through this.
Oh, my niece on the 26-minute tape.
The drama kicked off almost immediately at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in downtown Chicago. Shortly after arriving, Robert found himself in the SHU. While his legal team initially claimed there was no justification for the move, reports suggested otherwise. It turned out he had actually requested protective housing himself because he was concerned for his safety around other inmates. Given the nature of his charges, he viewed solitary confinement as the safer alternative. By September 2019, attorney Stephen Greenberg confirmed that Robert had been moved out of the SHU and either into the general population or assigned a cellmate. Prosecutors later backed this up in court filings, disputing any claims of prolonged or unfair isolation. Even before a verdict was reached, his time behind bars was becoming chaotic, and his legal team was already working hard to shape public perception. Then came August 2020, with an incident that dominated the headlines. Robert was straight up jumped while he was either asleep or sitting on his bed in his cell at MCC Chicago. Another inmate named Jeremiah Shane Farmer managed to get inside and launch an assault. Farmer, a convicted member of the Latin Kings gang already serving a life sentence for a double murder, reportedly landed multiple punches to Robert's head and body. Guards eventually stepped in to break it up, with one officer having to use pepper spray after Robert's attacker ignored verbal commands to stop. But look, this whole solitary situation in February 2026 wasn't his first rodeo behind those prison walls. The drama goes way deeper. What's been happening inside the federal system is like a movie that needs its own breakdown, filled with beatdowns, plots, and cell block chaos. Robert Kelly has been in continuous federal custody since July 2019, and his prison file reads like a screenplay nobody asked for. It all started at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in downtown Chicago, where the drama kicked off almost immediately. Robert ended up with cuts, bruises, and minor injuries, but nothing life-threatening. The attack actually went down during a facility-wide lockdown. Some reports suggested that Farmer's frustration stemmed from repeated lockdowns triggered by protests outside the jail regarding Robert's case, compounded by the general stress of COVID-19 restrictions hitting the prison system. Following the assault, Robert was moved back to the SHU for his own protection. His attorneys, Tom Farinella, Doug Anton, and Steve Greenberg, went public, calling for his immediate release on bail by arguing that the prison simply couldn't guarantee his safety. This is where things get truly wild. Farmer himself filed a handwritten court motion, claiming that MCC staff essentially encouraged or allowed the attack to happen. He alleged that officials told him to go through with it to draw attention to his own unrelated case. Farmer even claimed that guards followed him, let the beating play out for a while, and only stepped in later. Prosecutors and prison officials, however, dismissed these claims as completely unfounded. Notably, Farmer faced no additional charges for the assault in major reports, likely because he was already serving a life sentence. At the time, MCC Chicago was a disaster zone, struggling with violence, staffing shortages, and poor conditions that eventually led to the facility's partial closure. While Robert's lawyers leaned heavily on this incident in their bail requests, every single one of them was denied. The situation surrounding Robert sparked a massive debate. Was he receiving special treatment, or was his safety actually being compromised due to the nature of his crimes? By early 2023, once his sentencing was finalized, he was transferred to FCI Butner Medium 1 in North Carolina. This is a medium security facility that houses a wide range of inmates, and it's where things took a dark turn in June 2025. Everything came to a head on June 10th. Right after Robert's legal team filed an emergency motion for temporary furlough or home confinement, he was suddenly placed in the SHU, solitary confinement. The motion made some heavy allegations, claiming there was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by Bureau of Prisons officials. According to his lawyers, officials had recruited an inmate from the Aryan Brotherhood to take Robert out. They also claimed that his mail was being tampered with to intimidate witnesses and that privileged attorney-client information was being leaked through a cellmate. His legal team argued that putting him in the SHU was nothing more than a retaliatory move. While Robert was in solitary around June 12th and 13th, his lawyers alleged that prison staff administered an overdose-level amount of his prescribed anxiety and sleep medication, way beyond his normal dose. Robert reportedly collapsed, had to crawl to his cell door, and eventually lost consciousness. He was rushed by ambulance to Duke University Hospital in Durham, where he was treated for several issues including blood clots in his lungs. After being hospitalized for about 2 days, his legal team claimed he was removed from the hospital at gunpoint and against medical advice before his treatment was even finished. Once back in solitary, Robert reportedly started refusing prison meals, fearing he was being poisoned. He even compared his situation to Jeffrey Epstein's death, saying he'd feel safer just being back in his regular cell. Real talk, this entire sequence of events was added to the emergency motion. His attorney, Michael Brindley, held a press conference, framing the whole thing as a deep-rooted plot of corruption. The team even made a public appeal to President Trump for immediate clemency, calling him the only person with the courage to fight corruption in cases involving public figures. They claimed to be in touch with people in Trump's circle and were pushing for a direct conversation, though no formal clemency application was actually filed through the standard channels. By June 20th, Judge Pohl denied the request for release. The judge cited a lack of jurisdiction, since the issues were happening at a North Carolina facility, and concluded there was no legal basis for the relief they were asking for. On the other side, prosecutors didn't buy any of it, dismissing the allegations as fanciful, unserious, and a complete mockery of the harm caused to the victims. A planned hearing was eventually cancelled, with the Bureau of Prisons and prison sources describing the hospitalization as nothing more than routine medical care, flatly denying any claims of an intentional overdose. Even in the middle of all this legal chaos, Robert was reportedly still finding ways to stay musically active behind bars. In March 2025, TMZ reported that he was actually singing during a podcast interview from prison, keeping his craft alive despite the circumstances. Footage even surfaced online showing him performing his classics for fellow inmates at the same time his lawyers were filing emergency motions claiming his life was in danger. It's a wild contrast to see. Throughout these incidents, a clear pattern started to emerge. Robert's legal team consistently framed his time in the SHU as punitive, part of a conspiracy or inhumane treatment to back up their release motions, all of which were ultimately denied. On the other hand, the BOP and prosecutors maintained that these were just standard protocols, dismissing the defense's claims as exaggerations. Interestingly, there are no public records showing that Robert served long-term or repeated time in the SHU for actual infractions, like fighting or having contraband. Instead, it seems his celebrity status likely led to more frequent protective or investigative housing decisions. To date, the 2020 MCC assault remains the only documented physical attack on Robert in prison, with no other major fights being publicly confirmed. Looking back, most of his time in solitary clustered around three specific reasons: safety and protective custody. Following the 2020 attack, administrative investigations like the 2026 phone number drama and the claims of retaliation tied to his 2025 legal motions. The June 2025 hospitalization, in particular, sparked a massive divide on social media. Supporters saw it as undeniable proof of corruption and targeted harm within the federal system. Skeptics, however, viewed it as a calculated move to support release efforts after his appeals had run dry. It's also worth noting that the facilities themselves were already dealing with major issues. MCC Chicago had well-documented problems with violence, drugs, and COVID-19 during Robert's stay, eventually leading to its partial closure. Similarly, FCI Butner has faced its own scrutiny regarding medical and housing conditions that have nothing to do with Robert specifically. This suggests that while the conditions were poor, they weren't necessarily designed to target one specific inmate, even if that's how the defense painted it. The June 2025 filings contain some of the most intense allegations yet. Beyond the murder-for-hire and overdose claims, his attorneys alleged that officials were illegally accessing privileged attorney-client communications through a cellmate and tampering with mail to intimidate witnesses. They argued the entire situation was a constitutional violation amounting to cruel and unusual punishment. When Judge Pohl canceled the hearing and denied the motion, Robert's team didn't back down. They announced plans to file a motion to vacate his Chicago convictions based on newly discovered evidence related to these alleged plots. As of late 2025, extensions have been granted for responses regarding a new trial in the Chicago case, with deadlines now stretching into early 2026. Claims of life-threatening plots, the misery of solitary confinement, and medical neglect continued to pop up in legal filings throughout this period, but none of it led to his release. The courts consistently treated these allegations as either lacking evidence or falling outside their jurisdiction. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Prisons remained largely silent, citing security and privacy protocols. Despite all the noise regarding hits, overdoses, and isolation, his projected release date stayed firmly set for December 21, 2045. Every emergency motion was shot down, and every appeal was upheld. The legal system just kept moving forward like it was on autopilot. But the real question is, how did he even end up here? The trial that landed him behind bars wasn't some random event. The story behind those convictions stretches back through decades of drama. Robert Sylvester Kelly was born in 1967 and rose from Chicago's South Side to become one of the most successful R&B artists in history. With massive hits like I Believe I Can Fly and Ignition Remix, he stacked up Grammys and global fame. But behind the music, allegations of sexual misconduct began piling up in the early 90s and never truly stopped. The first major red flag came in 1994. At age 27, Robert married his 15-year-old protege, Aaliyah, using a forged marriage certificate that claimed she was 18. Though the marriage was eventually annulled, witnesses in later trials testified that Robert had been involved with her since she was 13 or 14. They also claimed he bribed an official to make the marriage happen after she believed she was pregnant. His former tour manager, Demetrius Smith, later testified that he paid a state employee about $500 for the fake ID that listed Aaliyah as an adult. From there, the lawsuits started coming fast. In 1996, allegations surfaced that he had impregnated a 15-year-old and pressured her to have an abortion.
There's a difference between R. Kelly and Robert. R. Kelly's this fun, laughing, loving guy. But Robert is the devil.
Sparkle remained estranged from her family for an entire decade following that case. The Chicago Sun-Times had been tracking Robert's history for years. and reporter Mary Mitchell eventually joined Sparkle on Windy City Live to break down the situation and give the public the full perspective on what was really happening behind the scenes.
I could lend my voice to something that would highlight these young people who have been hurt.
The allegations simmered for years, but things truly exploded with the rise of the Me Too movement. In 2017 and 2018, women like Jerhonda Pace and Kitty Jones came forward to publicly detail claims of coercion, physical abuse, starvation, and forced sexual encounters. Former associates also alleged that Robert directed his staff to recruit young-looking women and girls at malls, concerts, and even McDonald's locations. The tipping point arrived in January 2019 with the Lifetime 6-part docuseries, Surviving R. Kelly, executive produced by Dream Hampton. The series featured interviews with multiple accusers who described a cult-like environment. They claimed there were strict rules requiring them to ask for permission just to eat, use the bathroom, or even leave a room. The allegations also included isolation, physical and sexual punishment for breaking rules, and the transmission of STDs. The documentary became a massive cultural moment, drawing in over 26 million viewers across its episodes. The fallout was immediate and massive. John Legend was one of the few major artists who agreed to appear in the documentary to speak out. Later, on Watch What Happens Live, he explained exactly why he felt it was important to be involved.
R. Kelly has brought so much pain to so many people, and he should be ashamed of himself.
Legend didn't stop there. He also took to social media to double down after the documentary premiered. He was vocal about his stance, using his platform to support the survivors and address the backlash, making it clear that he wasn't backing away from his involvement in the series.
And people have no idea that this man just beat me on the bus.
Robert's ex-wife, Andrea Kelly, also broke her silence in a series of emotional interviews, providing a rare look at what life with him was really like behind closed doors. She detailed the physical abuse she allegedly endured, describing the pain of having to hide bruises while performing on stage as his lead dancer. The Mute R. Kelly campaign hit incredibly hard, sparking a massive boycott across the entire music industry. Streaming giants like Spotify and Apple Music began removing his music from their curated playlists and recommendations, and RCA Records eventually dropped him altogether. Robert's response was a defiant 19-minute track titled, I Admit, where he essentially denied all the allegations while ironically sounding like he was admitting to a lot between the lines. In July 2019, the federal government stepped in. Robert was arrested on heavy racketeering and sex trafficking charges. Prosecutors alleged he had been running a criminal enterprise for nearly 25 years, recruiting girls and young women, transporting them across state lines, and using strict rules, isolation, and abuse to control them. The 2021 trial in Brooklyn lasted 6 weeks and featured over 40 witnesses, including 11 accusers who testified under pseudonyms. These victims described a disturbing pattern of grooming that started when they were teenagers, followed by hundreds of instances of abuse, physical violence, and total control over their lives. After just 9 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted him on all 9 counts, leading to a 30-year sentence. Then came the 2022 Chicago trial, which focused on child pornography and the enticement of minors, specifically tied to tapes from the late 90s and early 2000s. The woman from the infamous 2002 video, now in her 30s, testified that Robert had groomed her since she was 13, posing as a godfather figure. He was convicted on 6 counts and sentenced to 20 years, most of which runs concurrently with his New York sentence. The judge described his actions as calculated and carried out with a total indifference to human suffering. The impact on his career was nuclear. Between the New York and Chicago convictions, his professional life as a mainstream artist was over. No labels, no tours, and no major promotions. Ironically, the headlines actually caused a short-term spike in his numbers, with album sales jumping over 500% and streams for hits like Ignition, Remix, rising over 20%, right after the verdicts. While he hasn't released an official studio album from behind bars, he's still been finding ways to be creative. In March 2025, he released a remix of Residuals to lean into a trending social media challenge, with the vocals reportedly recorded recently from FCI Butner. His attorney framed this as proof that his creativity remains intact and that he isn't letting prison life slow him down. In early 2026, an audio clip of Robert singing over Chris Brown's It Depends began circulating online. Both Teddy Riley and Chris Brown reacted positively on Instagram, with Riley even calling him the king of R&B and teasing the possibility of new music. In prison phone interviews, Robert has claimed to have written roughly 25 albums since being locked up, describing his drive to create music as a beautiful, incurable disease. Kelly content floating around, like the gospel albums A Prisoner's Prayer or Holy Jesus, is actually AI-generated or fan-made. Fact-checkers have debunked several viral prison music videos as AI fabrications, pointing out unnatural visuals and vocal glitches. There was also a bootleg album titled I Admit It that briefly hit streaming platforms in 2022, but it was unauthorized and quickly pulled after his team disavowed it. Throughout his time behind bars, Robert has maintained his innocence, framing the allegations against him as extortion, media hysteria, or social media smears. He's consistently shifted the blame toward his accusers in what he calls biased media coverage. Legally, his team continues to argue that the RIECO charges were an overreach and that the evidence was insufficient. During a March 2025 appearance on the podcast Inmate Tea with A&P, Robert sang snippets of classics like When a Woman's Fed Up and Bump and Grind. He spoke about music as his lifelong passion, claimed again to have dozens of albums ready to go, and mentioned he's focusing on his eventual release through strategic patience. Public opinion remains completely split. To his supporters, these prison updates are proof of an unbreakable spirit and a man wrongly accused. To his critics, these statements are tone-deaf and manipulative, especially considering the detailed victim testimony and the jury's findings. Meanwhile, memes, misinformation, and false rumors about an early release continue to clutter the timeline whenever his name pops up. Despite the noise, his projected release date remains December 21st, 2045. Every appeal has been denied. Every emergency motion has been tossed. Those viral cigar lounge clips from 2019 might circulate forever, but the man in them isn't walking free anytime soon. The streets are still talking and the clips are still recycling, but the receipts are set in stone. That's it for now. Until next time, fam. Don't forget to click the card on your screen for more breakdowns like this one.